Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Album of the Year series here on Music Meltdown, which we go through every year, give our favorite albums of said year. We're in the midst of the 70s with 1974 now. We have an unsung hero of the 70s. This year often gets overshadowed by the four, hell, technically like all of the 60s before it. This year, a little bit of digging. There's some really, really good stuff here. That's not like so immediately obvious in comparison to other years. Like you don't have Dark Side of the Moon, which you didn't mention because it's not that good. Like you don't have Close to the Edge in this year, which I didn't mention because it's not that good. But yeah, there's plenty of really cool stuff and plenty of really cool albums this year. That being said, Patrick, how are you feeling for 74?
74, great, another great year. Probably not quite as strong as 73, but almost there. Certainly, it fits well within the 70s, being what I consider one of the strongest decades for music. There's plenty to choose from. Some great debut albums and some changes in musical approaches by some established artists in this point. Some surprises, I think, from artists from the 60s. And Prog's this was sort of the edge of the peak before the decline of progressive rock. Um, but there is definitely a prog rock album on my list for 1974.
Technically three on mine. Technically three, but two of them are a bit
Holy smokes! For 74,
two are a bit suspect, but technically three.
prog-ish,
Definitely prog adjacent.
prog
But
adjacent.
some
Okay.
honorable some honorable mentions for me. This first one is a little bit goofy, but I think this record is kind of fun. Holiday by America. Wait for the Sky by Jackson Brown. Caribou, Elton John. Small Talk by Sly and the Family Stone. The Hoople by Mott the Hoople. Grievous Angel by Graham Parsons. On the Beach by Neil Young. And the album that was in my top five but had to get kicked out due to something you brought up last 10 minutes ago. It'd be Apostrophe by Frank Zappa, just missing. And
Yep.
then in my top five, I mean, come on, come on, it's me. First of the sort of prog adjacent records, it's, well, duh,
Have your visual aids prepared.
Eldorado, Lunch by Orchestra. Just sure, they aren't a prog band at this point anymore, but there's definitely still progressive elements here. Band are sensational. The orchestration, this is whenever they're starting to get fully orchestrated, they're outstanding. Jeff Lynne, arguably the greatest pop songwriter of all time, in my opinion. Put him right next to McCartney, put him right next to Lennon, right there. Love him. Tracks like the overtures on here, Can't Get Out of My Head is delightful. I adore Boy Blue. Even then, his voice is just outstanding. Adore
Yeah,
Eldorado. Fuck is this album cover? It doesn't got shit to do with Eldorado. But anyways, it's fun. Next
it's
up for
before
me,
the spaceship covers.
that's true. That's true. Next up, probably the worst album cover of the year, but an album that I love a lot. Not my winner anymore, but I still really like it. Heroes Are Hard to Find, Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac are like the Cinderella story of the 70s so far. So many of the Bob Welch era records miss. And I adore the Bob Welch era. It is by far my favorite era of Fleetwood Mac. It's such great, sort of almost like sunshine esque pop with this really cool, almost like subtle jazz and soulful quality coming in from Welch. I love it a lot. And Christine is practically in Rumors era with how great her pop rating is across this record. The title track is outstanding. Something like Come a Little Bit Closer is lovely, but the real shining jewel on this record is Silver Heels, a really funky, really soulful track from Welch, which he name checks both Etta James and Paul McCartney and does it brilliantly. Love it a lot. Another one that also I think is great. I got prog and I got pop on this list. I got Sundown by Gordon Lightfoot. Really just a brilliant, the apex of folk pop within this decade. Gordon Lightfoot, brilliant melody writer and has some just really lovely vocal parts and writing across here. The production is just sublime. Loved it a lot. Runner up, the record that you brought up to me, definitely the most overt prog on my list. Almost definitely going to be your winner, Red by King Crimson. I'll let you talk about that one later. But my winner, not what I was anticipating, but as I looked through, I think this is the most complete, full track by track album of this year. And another one, this one definitely more prog than El Dorado, I would say. And Crime of the Century by Supertramp.
Mm,
This is just a really delightful record. Supertramp, obviously more well known for some of their more pop hits and obviously Breakfast in America, but on here they are just a really great sort of poppy leaning progressive band. Really, just all the songs are great. The band is playing at top form, and production wise, I always bring it back to that. But this is probably the best sounding record in their catalog. Really, just nothing wrong to say about it except what is this cover? This year is not great for album covers. I'll say that much. You also got stuff like Caribou by Elton John, and Small Talk isn't a
right,
very pretty cover either. So,
right. I don't know if Hypnosis did that Supertramp cover. I don't remember.
possibly.
Um, the whole, I mean, it's a loose concept album about the crime of the century is the failure of the British school system, the English school system, right?
Ah,
And a lot of the songs on that album, Dreamer,
yeah,
and one of my favorite. That's a great pick, by the way. One of my favorites, Bloody Well Right. You are
nice.
bloody well right, Adrian. That is a great freaking album.
I see you're talking about because it didn't make your list.
No, it didn't. Because this year, like 70 through 73, is just super rich with great albums. So honorables for me is going to be Brian Eno's debut album, Here Come the Warm Jets. Just any album that would contain the song Babies on Fire gets a pick, has to be included in a list for me. So I'll put it here in honorables. He released two this year too, Taking Tiger Mountain by Strategy, which didn't I can't do both, but and I probably preferred this one just a little bit more,
Stopping
but
you.
I love them both.
Just
I
stopping you. You
love them
talk
both.
about both.
They're both great. They're both fantastic. And this will not be the last time shows up on on my list either. Next one is Ellis Regina and Antonio Carlos Jobim, Ellis and Tom. This is certainly Jobim's last great album. Ellis, she was a superstar in Brazil, and she's got just an amazing voice, just very nuanced, but such a wide range, and so perfect. She could sing anything. She had to like go through hell and high water to get a visa, travel visa to visit Jobim in LA to record this album. And these were two icons, paramours of Brazilian music. And it's just a gorgeous album. It's a beautiful album. If you like bossa nova, and I love bossa nova, this is an essential album to listen to. It's just fantastic. I've got the next honorable mention that boy I had to pull out of my top five, but I love it so much. Betty Davis. They say I'm different. She is funky as shit. She used to be married to Miles Davis, and she wouldn't put up with him after he started becoming physically abusive to her. She didn't have to. She could stand on her own. She could do anything she wanted. If it wasn't for Betty Davis, Miles Davis wouldn't have made Bitches Brew or On the Corner or Jack Johnson or had any funk or rock influence at all. It was Betty Davis who influenced his direction. In fact, she named the album Bitches Brew. She is crucial in Miles's 70s period, but she is an artist in her own right. She never got enough credit. She composed, she arranged, she is a just such a compelling performer. If you've ever seen, there's snippets of her on YouTube Live you can watch, and there's also a documentary on her that's very good as well. And she is funky to the core. She scares men half to death. They're insecure little babies. She is strong. She's sexually aggressive. She is a female analog to Prince. Um, gender bending as well as Prince. And she was doing it before Prince became big. Um, and I wouldn't doubt if she wasn't an influence on Prince. I would not be surprised at all. I haven't looked it up, but anyway, Betty Davis released three great albums in a row. This is a second one. They say I'm different. Absolutely. If you like funk, you have to check this album out. Uh, Sparks, Come On My House. What a wonderful album. Um, Ron and Russell are the, they're not only tight siblings, they are you can't separate them. They're a pair that has to be together. And there's good reasons for that. One has an amazing voice. It can just jump octaves. The other one is a brilliant musician and a fantastic lyricist. Witty satire. You know, um, This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us was such a huge hit in Britain. However, they're American. There's a great documentary on them that you should check out if you haven't seen it. And then my last honorable, I gotta go. I know. My last honorable is Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark. This was the start of Joni's Joni heading down the path of jazz. When she would which would culminate really with later albums like Kajira, but also she did an album with Charles Mingus. It's not very good. Mingus was very sick at the time. But she always even before this, even with For the Roses and Blue, there was always jazz phrasing, jazz chord structures, minor key modalities. She always you could hear that she had a large jazz influence. I know she was also influenced heavily by jazz vocal groups like Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. She even covers a song of theirs on this album that Annie Ross wrote. And it's Joni again, another like iconoclast of the 70s, right? Along with Stevie and David, and what's amazing. Anyway, top five. Number five is Neil Young on the Beach. Love this album. This is Sad Bastard Neil, and Sad Bastard Neil is the best Neil. And he was a sad bastard for a large part of the 70s. So really, Harvest was sort of a confessional album for him, but as it continued on and On the Beach, of course, the irony of the album cover and the title. This is like depressed, poor me Neil, never happy with life. It's also a good retrospective and observation of the 60s that Neil had such a large part of. His friends in Buffalo Springfield and in Laurel Canyon and the whole hippie scene. Neil has he's removing himself from this. It's a 60s come down album, even this late, into the mid 70s, right? 1974. Great album. It gets overlooked. I think it's underrated. One of Neil's underrated albums because I think it's just spectacular. Um, Next on my list is Big Star Radio City. I like this just a little bit more than their debut album. I don't think that's because Bell is no longer around. I think this album is funkier. It's even though it's a power pop band, it's certainly harder. It's got a much better groove. Some of the songs, "Oh My Soul," um, "Sitting in the Back of a Car," "September Girls," which is almost a perfect pop song. It's just as strong as their debut. A lot of people love their debut. I do too. I think this album is just as good as their debut, and it's a wonderful, wonderful album. Even though Alex left, Alex Chilton still around, and he's his song, the strength of his songwriting alone. Jody Stevens on drums, great, great, great album. Radio City, Big Star, sounds fantastic, really well recorded. Uh, Number three is going to be Miles Davis. Get Up With It. This is the last I'll mention of Miles. This album, I've already got three in the 70s places for Miles albums. This is my favorite. This is probably my favorite phase of Miles. Even though I love his quintets, the first and second, and I love Kind of Blue, and the Modal Records and Birth of Cool, all the way back to the 50s, even late 40s, 50s, and 60s. Love all of that stuff. But the 70s, he was so exploratory here. Brian Eno credits this album as a heavy influence on him in the creation and innovation of ambient music. And you can hear it. There's a reason for it. This was the last album that Miles would make before he went into a long retirement. And even though Betty and Miles both appear on this year, they are, they are divorced. They had been divorced long before 74 rolled around. So, um, a great album, the last great Miles Davis album. Get up with it. Funky, ambient. It's absolutely ambient. It's got avant-garde to it, fusion in it, and it's the same players that have been on all of his 70s albums, studio albums anyway. Gene Clark is number two, no other. This is a great, great album. This is definitely peak Gene. Varied, uh it's varied, it's all over the place. There's like a bit of soul and R&B in here. I think Stevie Wonder was a huge influence on Gene at this time. The song, the title track, No Other, is fantastic. Strength of Strings is fantastic. There's a bit of country that Gene grew up loving, and some of his earlier songs had a strong country tinge to them. But I don't hear any birds in this album at all. This is Gene. This is truly Gene solo. And then number one, King Crimson Red. This is the last album of that great lineup of Bruford, John Wetton, and Robert Fripp. And this is this is as close as King Crimson got to heavy metal. It is really tough, straight, gut punch of an album. It the song Red itself, the title track, One More Red Nightmare, great song. And then of course, you know, the one of King Crimson's greatest instrumental tracks, Starless, a popular one that they did in concert a lot. Fripp is fantastic on this song, just such an expressive guitarist, and a beautiful piece. And it finishes off this album so strong. Fallen Angel, Providence. There's not a bad song on this album. I think this is probably my favorite King Crimson album, period. Love it. Yeah, good. Yeah.
Yep. Nice list, nice list. My only complaint, if you will, is I just don't really get Big Star. I've tried. They're just not really fun.
Huh. Wow. Okay. I know you like power pop, so that's interesting.
Got hit or miss with power pop some of the time. There's some stuff that just doesn't really do it for me. Like for example, Sparks as well. I tried listening to that record.
Right.
We'll leave it at that. But yeah, some cool picks, almost lining up there. Probably the closest that we've been with Red being my number two and your winner.
Yes.
Will it happen again?
Yes.
Probably.
73, we had a lot of overlap, a little less overlap this time, but still, Red shows up, and I think we'll have more overlap coming.
I think there's a chance that we share a winner in 77, but I also don't know what I've heard there. So we'll see.
Right.
There's also the television factor, which we'll get there.
Yes.
With that being said, I hope that you enjoyed this. Hope that you all had a good time, and we'll stick around for 75, a worse year. We'll see you all then.